One of the things that we've done at many of our presentations, and we very much like to do it, we don't always have the opportunity to do it, but we take somebody from the audience and make them an honorary Negro Leaguer for the night. And generally, it's a young person. Well, it's always a young person that we do it to. And we've got a very special young person with us tonight. His name is Victor. He's got his Monarchs hat on, the Kansas City Monarchs. Some of you may know how important a team that was. And we're very pleased to have you with us tonight, Victor. You can stand up.
Play ball.
Yeah, play ball, huh? Play ball. Really nice to have you with us, Victor. It's interesting to start this out as a presentation because there are many places that you can go at the outset. I think most people who come to this kind of presentation, well, let me ask the question. The question is, who do you first think of when you think of black baseball and somebody who played black baseball in a wonderful way? Say it, come on. A lot of you. Jackie Robinson. Sure, it's Jackie Robinson. But the title of the program tonight is Before You Can Say Jackie Robinson. Black baseball in the era of the color line. Is there a mistake here? Should we have started with Jackie? Well, I'm going to take you into a piece of the history that goes back all the way into the 1880s. Because there's someone back there who did something that is connected to Jackie in lots of ways. It seems in some ways that they might have been cousins, except there's this, no, I don't mean that literally. It seems that they might have been cousins, but there's this big gap. Jackie was, Joy pointed out, a significant year. 1947 he breaks in the majors. You do know that he really broke in New Jersey the year before with the Montreal Royals of the International League in Roosevelt Stadium in Jersey City. And the first day at bat and out in the field, we knew right away that Jackie was going to be very, very, very special. But let me take you back at the outset here to 1884. A fellow by the name of Moses Fleetwood Walker would play that year for the Toledo Mud Hens in the International League. You can't go any higher than the International League and you're into the minors, so this is a very good league that he's playing in. He's a catcher, very good catcher. Oh, a decent batter too. Moses Fleetwood Walker, and he was black. And if you search into the history back there in the well, not quite the 60s, but the 70s and 80s, Moses Fleetwood Walker wasn't alone. There's probably, we look at the records and we think that, oh, there must have been about 30 black players who played at the highest levels of the minor leagues, but not Moses Fleetwood Walker. He played in the major leagues in 1884. American Association was a major league that year, and Moses caught for the Toledo Mud Hens. Now think about this with me for just a minute or two. Who integrated Major League Baseball? Everyone knows that Jackie did it. But in an interesting sort of way, Jackie was reintegrating Major League Baseball because Moses Fleetwood Walker did it first. Huh? So it's useful, I think, to really start back there and take you down the road that precedes Jackie, and that's largely what we're going to do tonight. That play of Moses Fleetwood Walker was a harbinger of black players playing in organized baseball back then. And the first place that I want to take you to tonight, appropriately, it's Newark, New Jersey. It's 1886, and a team from the major leagues, the Chicago White Stockings, is coming into play against the Newark team in International League. It's a July 4th game, and it's a big thing. Baseball was very big back then. The Newark Giants of the International League had two black players playing for them. One of them is this Moses Fleetwood Walker, And the other was a pitcher named George Stovey. George Stovey won 30 games that year. I don't have to tell you, you already figured out that he must have been a very, very good pitcher. Huh? And Moses Fleetwood Walker was his battery mate and a good catcher and pretty good hitter. And so when word gets out to the Chicago White Stockings, one of the fathers of baseball, Anson, Adrian Cap Anson is the owner and manager of the White Stockings. Word gets out to him that there were 2 blacks on this team that he's coming to play. And when word gets out to him, he says, no, I'm not going to play against them. You know, them, of course, would be folks who were used or were identified with a very different word than them. Huh? I'm not going to play against those guys. You got to get rid of them this particular day. The International League, Little Giants, bow to the pressure that Cap Anson is putting on them. And that day, George Stovey and Moses Fleetwood Walker don't appear on the field of play. Huh? The next day, the International League owners meet in a special meeting, and it's the only, how many of, do you know the term gentleman's agreement? Have some of you heard that term previously? You know, the agreement amongst the major league owners, never written down, never spoken about very widely, but it was there, that no blacks could play in the majors. The only time we have it written down is the next day when the International League owners meet, and the line that comes out of that meeting in the notes of the meeting is that no more contracts from colored players will be honored. We don't want them anymore. We follow this road of rejection in some interesting ways. We get out of baseball for just a minute or two. And we go to 1880 and 1883, when a whole host of cases come up before the Supreme Court. They're called the civil rights cases. In 1875, there was passed a very significant piece of legislation in the Congress of the United States, the Civil Rights Act of 1875. Public accommodations are open to blacks, this particular act says. Huh? Well, it comes up before the Supreme Court in 1883, and the Supreme Court rules that that particular piece of legislation was unconstitutional. It's not going to be applied. Public accommodations to blacks, no, they're going to be stopped. Huh? Well, I want to read something to you here very briefly. This is a comment from a AME, African Methodist Episcopal bishop. His name was Henry McNeil Turner. And he's commenting on what the Supreme Court has done. And when you listen to this, you know that this man is very angry. Huh? This is what Henry McNeil Turner says about that decision by the Supreme Court. A word more, and I am done, as you wish with brevity. God may forgive this corps of unjust judges, but I never can. Their very memories will also be detested by my children's children, nor am I alone in that detestation. The 8 millions of my race and their posterity will stand horror-frozen at the mention of their names, the names of the judges that handed down that decision. The scenes that have passed under my eyes upon the public highways, the brutal treatment of helpless women, which I have witnessed since that decision was proclaimed, is enough to move heaven to tears and raise a loud acclamation in hell over the conquest of wrong. But we will wait and pray and look for a better day, for God still lives and the Lord of hosts reigns. I am, sir, yours for the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. Angry man, and he deserves to be angry, certainly, in what the Supreme Court did. Huh? That Supreme Court that isn't so popular today for a lot of the stuff that they did, too. I think there's a case that a lot of you, or at least a few of you probably know, that wasn't in 1883, but was in 1896. What is it now?
Dred Scott?
No, not Dred Scott. Dred Scott takes you way, way back in time. but it was comparable in some. Yeah, somebody just said Plessy. Did I hear that? Yeah, Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. I'm not going to get into that in detail, but what it amounts to are stop signs. Separate but equal, they would say, this decision institutes. We all know that it could be separate, but it wouldn't be equal. But these stop signs go off up of this decision. You can't go here, you can't do that, you can't be this, you can't even say these kinds of things. Huh? Stop sign after stop sign after stop sign, and they're directed at the black population. Huh? Now I got a question for you. I was a teacher for 40 some odd years, so I have a right tonight to give out tests and quizzes. This will be your first recorded quiz here. What do you do as a people when something like Plessy versus Ferguson comes into being and all these stop signs go out? What do you do? What was done back then in terms of these decisions that were awful decisions? Huh? Come on. What do you do? Most people would say, probably didn't hear that. Most people would say you protest. And yes, you did protest. But in lots of ways, even more so, you start to do for yourself what the larger society is saying you're not supposed to do or you can't do. Huh? And it's in that time period, off of Plessy versus Ferguson, that blacks start to do an organized, or they had done it earlier than that in some ways, but very much so in the aftermath of Plessy versus Ferguson, that blacks begin to do for themselves in a systematic way what Plessy versus Ferguson would say you can't do. Huh? Black businesses come into being, black colleges expand themselves, black banks come into being, and it's the start of a world that is a very, very rich world and will be in place all the way down to integration as it comes in the 1950s. Well, baseball. Where does black baseball come from? Where does Negro League baseball come from? It comes from opposition to those stop signs. Yes, we're going to do for ourselves what the larger world says we can't do. Huh? And so, the Brooklyn Royal Giants, the Philadelphia Giants, the Kansas City Monarchs, the Chicago American Giants, and I could go on through 15 teams or so that were professional baseball teams playing for themselves, organizing their teams. And that's the origins, really, of black baseball, of Negro League baseball, that atmosphere and what was happening back there. Well, that's kind of an introduction to a little piece of our documentary that we want to show you tonight. One of those teams that came into being in this time period was the Bacharach Giants. We're coming back to New Jersey. The Bacharach Giants of Atlantic City, New Jersey. A team that intact, really. 15 or so players came up from Jacksonville, Florida, brought up by politicians in Atlantic City who wanted to present themselves in a positive way to the black population that was now rising in Atlantic City. Harry Bacharach, who would be the mayor of Atlantic City shortly after this, and a couple of black businessmen decided it would be a good thing to have a team. Bacharach, some of you go to Atlantic City. Everybody in New Jersey goes to Atlantic City, don't they, one time or another. And Bacharach Boulevard is down there. And Harry Bacharach was a very significant person in Atlantic City. And he finances this team. A couple of black businessmen were a part of it too. And the team is a team that's a very important team in the Eastern Colored League, which is the second major league, black major league. 1923 is the first season of the Eastern Colored League. And the Bacharach Giants would be one of the founding members of that league. Oh, well, here I've got, we want to talk about the importance of this particular team. My baseball fans in here. White baseball now for just a minute or two. Who is the first pitcher to pitch a no-hit, it happened to be a perfect game, a no-hit, no-run game in World Series history? Yeah, you got it. Somebody else say it. I don't want just one person to answer this question. Where are my baseball fans here? Huh? I got one baseball fan right here. Huh? Oh, everybody knows Yogi, don't you? You know, if you talk baseball, Yogi Berra. There's this wonderful picture of Yogi running out into Don Larson's hands and arms because Larson has pitched the first no-hit, no-run game. Time out. Time out. 1926, Chicago American Giants versus the Bacharach Giants of Atlantic City. The Negro League World Series. This is the third Negro League World Series. A guy named Claude Red Greer, pitching for the Atlantic City Bacharach Giants, pitched a no-hit, no-run game. Well, somebody will say, you know, that's not the real World Series. But wait a second. You know, is the real World Series real when they don't allow blacks to play? Huh? You know, let's get our, you know, our language right here. Huh? Other things that this team does is quite remarkable, but the thing that you're going to tune into tonight for just a few minutes is a fellow by the name of John Henry Pop Lloyd. And players will talk to you about John Henry Pop Lloyd, so I'm not going to say much about him, other than to say he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Amongst the first group that went into the Baseball Hall of Fame was John Henry Pop Lloyd. And he was an outstanding player. And he played for the Bacharach Giants, managed them a couple of seasons, and now you're going to meet him.
I didn't know whether or not I'd ever play, you know, professionally. I didn't ever know whether I'd ever play in the major leagues, but I certainly wanted to play in the Negro leagues. You see, at that time, we aspired to playing in the Negro leagues. That was as high as our aspirations could go. And because now, I would say, well, one of these years, maybe I'd like to play for the Homestead Grays, or one of these years I'd like to play for the Newark Eagles, or I'd like to play for the Lincoln Giants, or I'd like to play with the Pittsburgh Crawfords. If you were a baseball player, you did aspire to playing with one of those clubs. Mm-hmm. Now, we never knew that later on we'd get a chance to play in the majors, but those were our inspirations at that time.
We loved the game. We loved the game. We, just like Pint was saying, when we played against one another, we were really ferocious against one another. But after the game was over, love and peace and harmony, but it was nothing like baseball in those days.
Well, that's the way baseball was. It was something that you enjoyed doing. It's a fun game. What the heck? Yeah. You're supposed to have fun out of it. They make a business. They make it too serious now, really.
When they told me they was going to pay me to play baseball, I said, they got to be crazy.
Yeah.
No, I said, I'd play for nothing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I said, they got to be.
I always held these people in esteem because they were great athletes, and they had a dignity, a kind of self-contained sense of worth.
When we look back at the segregation era, we're oftentimes think of the oppressiveness of it all, and indeed it was oppressive. Blacks were poor, Southern blacks in rural areas especially were without the right to vote. The Great Migration north had begun to show the signs of failure. But despite all of that, and underneath the veneer of that oppression, collectively and individually blacks were able to accomplish great things. And individually, black men were oftentimes marked with the qualities of decency, respectability. These guys had great senses of humor, and they were great athletes. When I think of those qualities, I often think of Pop Lloyd of Atlantic City, New Jersey.
John Lloyd was one of the finest shortstops that ever played in the Negro Leagues. He was tall and rangy and had a good arm, and more than anything else, he was a great hitter.
There are many recollections I have about Pop Lloyd. The biggest thing I'd like to say about him was that he was truly a gentle giant, and he was strong. He was a strong individual. He was strong in character. He was an honest man. He was a wonderful person, and it seemed as though adversity would just seem to fall off of his shoulders, and he would never dwell on adversity, that he would always go to the brighter side of whatever might come up at any particular time.
He was a lovable man, and he was a great ball player, He won one St. Louis baseball writer, referred to him as the greatest ball player. He was asked who was the greatest baseball player he'd ever seen. And the baseball writer said, well, if you mean in organized baseball, I'd have to say Babe Ruth. He says, but if you mean in all baseball, he says, it's an Atlantic City colored man named John Henry Lloyd. And he compared him to Hans Wagner. And Hans Wagner later said he felt honored to be compared with, or have John Lloyd compared with him. But John was I just loved the man. You can see that by the tears.
I guess Pop Lloyd is partially the reason why I am the mayor today. Because Pop taught me to be patient and not to be an angry young man. You see, I was angry because I had gone through the same thing as a professional basketball player, where we had been a great ball player and played with the New York Rens, which was a professional team, and yet we were not allowed to play in certain places because we were not white. And when I asked Pop, I said, Pop, aren't you angry about this? He said, well, I'm disturbed a little bit, but it's just something that happens. And Pop would give you that old laugh, and he would just keep on doing what he said, your time will come. And I've never forgotten that. Pop always would say, your time would come.
We talk a lot about the civil rights movement and when it begins, who starts it. It may be that the civil rights movement had many beginnings. Some of those beginnings are found on buses and lunch counters on dusky roads in the South and on the playing field of Negro baseball teams. It seems to me these guys must have known that they were involved in the most American of all pursuits, competition. But they weren't recognized, they weren't lionized in the larger American society. They were only recognized and appreciated, if you will, by their own people. So I think they must have looked forward to a day when, perhaps on their own terms, they would be recognized as great athletes, great American athletes. It seems to me that those sentiments, that vision, is one of the beginnings, one of the seeds of the modern civil rights movement.
I don't think you normally connect baseball to the civil rights movement, but it is. It's connected. As everything was connected prior to Brown versus Board of Education, when blacks carried themselves wonderfully in public, when they did things that the larger world was saying they weren't supposed to be doing. And I think you listen to Clement Price say that. So I think those two things are connected in very important sorts of ways. We've got something very important to move to next. We'll come back and do some of the chronological stuff, New Jersey stuff. But we've got somebody with us tonight who is a very special poet and a wonderful performer. And he's been influenced by the whole history of black baseball. He's an artist, and he looked at white baseball in terms of an iconic figure. How many of you, you've heard it, I think, huh? How many of you know Casey at the bat? Okay, well, you're going to meet a new Casey tonight. Kevin, come forward. Kevin Kane.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Professor Hogan. Someone once said of that iconic American poem, Casey at the Bat, it might not be great poetry, but it's a good poem. I would have to ask, if Casey at the Bat isn't great poetry, then what is? John Keats's Ode to Dejection? Petrarchian sonnets of melancholy? Longfellow's Hiawatha? I'll stick with Casey at the Bat every single time. Great poetry distills and focuses our perception of the human condition. Poetry uses the sound and the rhythm and the meaning of words in a way that illuminates and celebrates what it means to be human. Poetry uses language to delight and to move us. Well, Casey at the Bat does all of that, and then some. Not great poetry, denigrated by some as trite or banal or even hokey. Well, if Casey at the bat is hokey, then life is hokey. If Casey is trite, then falling in love is trite, and having your heart broken is banal. Bart Giamatti, the late commissioner of baseball, once said of this boys' game that grown men play, he said, "It breaks your heart. It's designed to break your heart." Baseball does just that again and again, and yet we keep coming back for more. What is it about us that we so enjoy this game and movies and stories and poems about baseball that make manifest the breaking of hearts? Maybe it's that human imperative that Ernest Lawrence Thayer observed so well in Casey. It's that hope that springs eternal in the human heart. Who among us, having read that poem 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years ago, doesn't read it again the same way as an adult that I do? Still hoping, still wishing, and yet still believing that this time, finally, at long last, Casey will keep his eye on the ball, his swing will be level, and he'll connect with the fat part of his bat and bring joy, long overdue, to the fans in Mudville. Mudville is where we live. It's who we are, citizens all of Mudville. From dust and dirt, were we first fashioned, and it's to dust and dirt we're going to return. The years between our arrival in this vale of tears and the making of our final out, those years are seasoned with hope and joy and crushing defeats, thrills, and yeah, with some broken hearts. And who would have it any other way? There may be no poem in the English language that has instigated, provoked, demanded even more poetic responses to the original than Thayer's Casey at the Bat. There have been parodies, sequels, prequels, what-ifs, and any number of alternate outcomes. Well, I've written a poem that isn't one of those. It's a poem that comes after Casey, but it's not about Casey. It's about another man. It's about another ball player. And it's about us. This poem takes place again in Mudville, but what doesn't take place in Mudville? It's hard to hide on a baseball diamond. Character is revealed. So was Mighty Casey a tragic figure, or was he a buffoon? Were we observing an act of hubris, or one of stoic resolve? And were we seeing in that poem the stuff of Greek tragedy? Does hope spring eternal in the human heart? Or are our lives lived in that quiet desperation that Henry David Thoreau described one time as being the common condition of the great mass of men? What I have for you this evening isn't a parody or a sequel to Casey at the Bat, but it's the narrative of another man's chance at the plate. We're going to stand in the place that Ernest Lawrence Thayer created 130 years ago, and we're going to look in another direction. We're going to look for another hero. We're going to look at what it means to be achingly human, to be a man 130 years ago, or to be a person today. Like Thayer's original poem, some might not call these verses great poetry, but again, I would ask if Casey at the Bat and other simple poems about baseball aren't great poetry, then what is? No, the outcome wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. Man, you could say that again. It was embarrassing to see the way those boys couldn't play. Mighty Casey standing there staring at two meatballs down the middle, and then the pitcher serves him up a tasty-looking fastball delivered on a platter, hot off the griddle. Old Casey wasn't looking so big then, didn't seem so keen of sight or blessed with might. Time for a name change here. Instead of Mighty Casey, from now on, maybe we should just call him less than the best, but at least he was white. No, this is no time to be bringing up old slights. What's done is done, and there is no going back. And so I won't bring up all the work done for little or nothing over the years by folks that were black. I guess I could never help being confused, though, at the way some folks were worked, and worked hard, I might say. Worked and worked and worked some more, and then never let to play. At least, not where the money was, where the grass was green and always cut. I'm talking about before, Jackie, way back, when black men couldn't play ball. Say, what? Couldn't play? They could play, and play they did, as well as any in the land, with hearts and souls, pitching and hitting and running on lots littered with stones and sand. But back to Casey, that mighty man, who left the fans in Mudville that day crying. Time to put that batter down is what I say. Like you might an old dog dying. Not because you don't love him, and not because that dog ain't trying, but it's long past time, son, to just move on. Let's put a man in that poem who can hit the ball. Maybe a darker shade of glory. Well, all right. We'll go back, like so many writers have before, to that Mudville patch of dirt. And let's just say, because it might have happened this way, say somehow Casey, he got hurt. Say just for speculation here, for grins and giggles, if you will. Say somehow Casey stubbed his toe in the 8th, and they went to the bench with a lineup card to fill. Well, say Cooney had already hit the showers. Happened more than once that way. And Jimmy Flynn had emptied a case of Rheingold cans and was way too soused to play. And the other ball players had been sitting there waiting for their turn to come. They'd left the ballpark already, saying the game that day was done. There was just one old black man in the clubhouse holding a broom who said, I've been known to swing a bat. And with no one else to send up to the plate, they gave him Casey's shirt and hat and said, if anyone should ask, and we mean anyone, you just tell them you recently lost a bit of weight and you've been working a lot in the sun. We're going to call you Casey, if you don't mind. And for today, that's who you'll be. That's fine, he said, because that's my name. I played a little ball in Kansas City once, and since then have been called KC. KC from Kansas City. He was a monarch if ever there was one. The king of clout he'd been called. The prince of players. The duke of getting it done. You talk about your Casey batting nothing for the Mudville 9. Let me tell you here the story of this shade of glory who played in another time. I know you've all heard what they tell about cool Papa Bell, who when wearied from knocking him out of the park, could turn off the light and be under the covers asleep in his bed, for his hotel room was dark. Or of Josh Gibson, who with one prodigious swat cleared the stadium wall with a hard-hit ball in the house they say Ruth built. The naysayers may cry, it's a lie. Well, no one has ever kept naysayers from neighing. But that ball was still headed for the sky when it was lost to the eye, and it never was found. I'm just saying. Now, I suppose you're going to want to bring up Ty Cobb. Well, you should, because Cobb was good. But was he really great? How many times would Ty Cobb have stolen second base if there'd been, say, Big Lou Santop in a crouch behind the plate? Cobb could hit the ball better than most, I'll give you that. And for his time, he was all the rage. But how would Cobb have done if he had to face someone like young Leroy Satchel Paige? Old Cobb had come at you with his bat when he wasn't sliding in hard, cutting you with both spiked feet. It's a cruel way to win. Unlike stealing home, clean as a whistle like Jackie done, sliding safe and popping right back up without missing a beat. Yeah, Jackie, he stole second a slew of times, and he stole third a whole lot too. And more than once, that man stole home with his conscience clear and the pitcher just standing there, holding the ball, not knowing what to do. The best that most ball players today could do could be fairly compared to Jackie's worst. On the third strike dropped one time by a catcher in Brooklyn, you know, I watched that man steal first. Old KC was the likes of all that, though older now and crowned with gray. And I'm talking more than just a trace. Still, he moved like no one I ever seen. Now there was a cat with grace. You know, he's talking about Casey, Casey this, Casey that. But I swear, there was a change in the air when Casey came to the plate wearing Casey's hat. He tapped his spikes, and he took a look at the pitcher, and he spit into the dirt. He was holding Casey's bat in his hands, and he was wearing Casey's shirt. Casey, do well, murmured his wife, waiting up in the stands. Casey, Casey, roared the crowd. And she was just as quiet and dignified as the throng there that day was loud. Casey watching. Casey waiting for his pitch, not worried about a thing. He'd done this 1,000 times before. He stood with the bearing of a king. He dragged the very first pitch, tossed his way, laid it down like a baby in the soft green grass, and was already rounding first when the pitcher picked up that ball and threw it past the first baseman, who watched it roll out on to the right field lawn, where the right fielder grabbed it and threw hard to second. But by then, old KC's long gone. So the second bagman threw hard to third, a new wrinkle on that old tinker, to Evers, to Chance. Except with old KC running the ball path, those players didn't have a chance. Now, KC's rounding third and racing toward the plate, and the catcher's jumping up and down, waving both hands. Where's the ball? Where's the ball? Where's the ball? Thrown in desperation over the dugout, it's somewhere up in the stands, being fumbled over and fought for. 100 hands grabbing for a souvenir. And fans are jumping and shouting and laughing, and men are kissing women and lifting cups of beer. There's nothing can stop KC now. We're champs, you chumps, is the cry, and there's no one can stop us from winning, except for KC, who slows to a stroll, and the whole world stops spinning. Go home, the crowd urges him on. Let's get this done. The game is over. The game is won. But KC is standing still now, his toe 2 inches from the plate. What's going on? The crowd wonders aloud, not knowing why KC just stands there with a halfway kind of smile. And the question races around the ballpark from man to woman to child. Touch the plate, touch the plate. 1,000 voices pray. But KC just stills them all with a hand in the air and says, let's first talk about my pay. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Hogan, you're on.
You know, that's a very, the old cliche, that's a very tough act to follow. I should just let Kevin come up here and close the program out. I could go on for 15, 20, 25 minutes because the record is there. And it's easy to talk into that record and talk about that record. But I've got an eye on the clock, and we want to have a question and answer period before we're through tonight. So I'm going to take you, let's see where I want to take you. I know we're going to go with one more piece. But let me save that piece. We'll do something else for just a couple of minutes. I'll point something else at. This gentleman, prior to the program, came up to me and said, what was the name of the team that played in Newark? And he said the Bears. Well, he's right. The Bears did play in Newark, a great minor league team. Some people argue the best minor league team of all time. But there was another team that played in Newark at the same time that the Bears played in Newark. They, in fact, shared a stadium, Rupert Stadium. And you come off of that Bear team and talk Yogi Berra and talk Phil Rizzuto, and right away you know it was a great team. But how about Monte Irvin? You met Monte there. He was talking to you just a bit ago. How about Larry Doby? New Jersey Larry Doby. How about Mule Scuttles? How about Leon Day? How about Willie Wells? They're all in the Baseball Hall of Fame. They practically make up a whole team amongst themselves. It's either 7 or 8, I blow that a little bit, 7 or 8 of these great black players now in the Baseball Hall of Fame, recognized as great. So the Newark Eagles were really something special. I'm going to introduce you to one Newark Eagle player, and he's going to speak to us in just a minute or two. He was a great third baseman. He was bow-legged, very bow-legged. They used to say about Ray Dandridge that you could drive a truck through his legs, but you're not going to drive a ball through those legs. Huh? Great third baseman, Ray Dandridge, with the Newark Eagles. Huh? And finally, after so many years, he should have gotten it earlier than he did, he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And he's making a speech, the famous induction speech that you make. Well, that's what we're going to hear now. I'm introducing you to Raymond Emmett Dandridge. And I think if I had to rate induction speeches, his would be right near the top. Let's have Ray Dandridge, please.
Right now, everybody asks me what my greatest thrill was. But my biggest thrill came when, March the 3rd, Mr. Ed Stack called my house. Yeah, you know, like you do, I was resting. My wife was in the backyard. So I answered the phone. The phone call said, I'm trying to find Ray Dandridge. I say, I'm Ray Dandridge. He said, you Ray Dandridge, the ball player? I said, yeah. And all of a sudden, he said, your life has changed. I said, what do you mean my life has changed? You know how it is, sometimes you get some of them crank calls, you know. So afterwards, me and him talk a while, and then he said, I'm Ed Stack, the president of the Hall of Fame, and you had just been elected for the Hall of Fame. Now, I want to sincerely thank each and every veteran on the committee allowing me to smell the roses. My only question is, why did you take so long? I can see in the audience, I got quite a few friends, north, east, south, west, and these people have traveled a long way, and I want to thank each and every one for coming to Cooperstown to see me elected in the Hall of Fame. In closing, let me say, if I had it to do all over again, I think I would do it the same way. I love the game of baseball, and I hope now today look like baseball loved me. So now, I'm going to say goodbye, and I hope, and I love you all. Maybe you never know how much I love you. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you. I never knew that the money would be there, the fame, and all those kind of things. It was just, you dedicate yourself to be the best you can be.
That's right.
And had it not been for guys like yourselves, I know I wouldn't be there. So I appreciate it, and it's good talking to you.
And we appreciate you saying these things because, and we're happy for you.
Well, yeah,
I'm glad that the money's there for you. You understand? Because it wasn't there when we played.
I understand.
No, it wasn't there. If we didn't love the game, then we wouldn't have played it. Because for the money, it wasn't.
Right, but that's what I feel. I love the game. I like to play. You see me, you know, I'm serious. I'm a serious ball player, but I'm smiling and having a good time too.
There was no question that this country and this sport that I'm now in charge of was not fair. And it took Jackie Robinson 40 years ago, together with Branch Rickey and Happy Chandler, to make it fair on the field of play. Now this year is a year we're dedicating to be sure it's fair off the field of play, so we can be an example again. And for Ray to come in this year, I think has much more meaning. It's a year of focus.
I think we should give a round of applause to Ray Dandridge. He was quite a guy. I'm privileged to have known him and had some good nights with him as well as good days. It's a special moment. You don't get into the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's the crown jewel, and Ray certainly deserved it. And why did you take so long? That could be a title very much to practically any presentation of Negro League history. Yeah? Well, let's open it up right now. We'll do something else after we finish, something very short with the, but let's open it right now with the questions and answers for just a bit. Any questions, comments? In the back, young lady.
Could you talk a little bit about Jim Robinson?
Oh, wow. Kevin, did you hear that?
No, I didn't, so could you repeat it?
The lady asked, could you talk a little bit about Jim Robinson?
Oh, yeah.
Come on, you get up here and talk about Jim. He was a very special person.
Did you know Jim at all, or were you? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jim was we just lost Jim a year ago, maybe 10 months ago. He was 92. He was a great man. He was a wonderful baseball player. And Larry had known him for quite a while, and I met him maybe 6 or 7 years ago, doing programs like this. We were doing 7 or 8 programs and all over New Jersey, and I live in the Bronx, so I would pick him up on 96th Street where he lived until 2 years ago, and we would ride for 2 or 3 hours in the car. And it was great to talk baseball with Jim. It was great to talk about anything. After his career he was the last team captain of the Kansas City Monarchs, second baseman, wonderful ball player, got a full scholarship to South Carolina?
Yes.
Great baseball school that, and who connected him to that?
Campy.
Campy.
Yeah, Roy
Campanella.
Yeah.
Was like on the board of directors down there or something. And he interrupted his college career to play baseball, but finished his college degree, ended up teaching and coaching in college, and was such a had such a wide-ranging intellect. And when you shook hands with him, my hand would disappear. and you know, he at 92 he had shrunk a bit, but he could still throw a ball with me. And I always have my 2 baseball gloves in the trunk of the car. And you know, he had big mitts for hands, and he laughed and was, you know, it was just such a treat to, you know, it's always fun to meet a major leaguer. It's always fun to meet heroes. And I you know, I like these heroes in baseball. And his Negro League debut was in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
And they used to play on Sunday afternoons when the Yankees were on the road. They would let the Negro Leagues come in and make them a lot of money because they would draw 30,000 people. They didn't let anyone do anything. They earned money from Jim Robinson playing ball and all of those great baseball teams. And when I first started working with Larry, there would be 18 of these guys around, right? 20 years ago,
and
25 years ago.
They're all gone. They're all gone now. Yeah.
And if you want to have some fun sitting around having guys tease each other, rib each other, laugh, and tell funny stories. A lot of them are in this documentary, which you can look at on YouTube, the whole thing. It's just such a pleasure to be in the company of greatness. And so,
Kev, too, there's a phrase that immediately comes to mind for me. And my wife is going to be embarrassed in what I'm going to say next. My wife is with us tonight.
She's never been embarrassed by you.
True. Oh.
Oh, once. I remember that time.
Anyway, the phrase that comes to mind is the gentlemen of the Negro Leagues. And Sally would echo me in that. You met Monte Irvin here a little bit ago, and some of you know Monte. Talk about gentlemen. And talk about people that you could like a lot and love a lot. My wife would say about Monte that if we ever got a divorce, she'd go after Monte if he were available. So it was a wonderful relationship. It got beyond, just with the ball players and me. It got into my family as well. But there were other teams as well, but there was one outstanding team that was owned by black folks. I say folks because it wasn't just a black man, it was a black woman, the only woman who's in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I have a thought that she'll probably be the only woman ever in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and that's Abe Manley and Effa Manley, who were really the co-owners of the Newark Eagles. So, other questions, comments at all? Yeah, in the back. I'm sorry, what did you say?
What's the name of the YouTube documentary?
The documentary.
Oh, it's called, it's called Before You Can Say Jackie Robinson. It is up on the screen? Yeah, Before You Can Say Jackie Robinson. Black baseball in America in the era of the color line. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well, we've gone on quite a while here. We're still under an hour, so I'm going to kind of bring it to a close by talking about somebody we haven't talked about, but most people know him from Ken Burns' documentary on baseball. His name was John Jordan Buck O'Neill. Very, very special guy. The ambassador of black baseball in lots of ways. Just 3 days ago, went into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Oh boy, Buck was something else. The stories that he had. I'll tell you just one. I'm in the Hall of Fame library, and we're getting ready for a program, and Buck comes in to be a part of the program. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning, let's say on a Wednesday. Buck is like, I don't know, 92 maybe at the time, or 91. He comes in while I'm up on the platform up here, and I see him. And I go down and I put my arms around him, and he puts his arms around me. And I say to him, Buck, I haven't seen you in a while. You look good. And with that smile on his face and not missing a beat, he says, Larry, good black don't crack. Good black don't crack. So, and there are lots of other stories about Buck too. But here, I'll leave you with this quote. They asked Buck one day if he was upset about it all, if he was angry about it all. And Buck would say, there's nothing like getting your body to do what it has to do on a baseball field. It's as good as sex. It's as good as music. Waste no tears on me. I didn't come along too early. I was right on time. Huh? I think that says it all. These guys were right on time. It's the rest of us who weren't on time. Huh? And the chance now to do a little bit of that catching up has been a joy for us. And I hope for you guys too. Huh? Thank you.